My ancestors are the Viking settlers of Iceland, whose brawn is well documented, but whose brains we might question after they rode thousands of miles to live on a frozen rock where the floor is literally lava. We see this idea everywhere that we can have either muscles or brains, but not both. And those who spend a lot of time working on their muscles are maybe doing it to the detriment of their brains. In the most watched TED Talk of all time, Sir Ken Robinson even tells us that the only reason why university professors think they have bodies is to transport their heads to meetings. Now, as a professor who studies brains and thinks there are other uses for the body, this never quite sat right with me. And in fact, we've seen that if we spend time building our muscles, there can also be benefits to our brain. We see studies where the more muscle people have, the more brain they have inside of their skulls, which is generally considered to be a good thing. We see that those who have more muscle also tend to perform better on certain cognitive function tests. This is because our muscles are actually organs, and when we work them by lifting weights, we release these things called myokines that go around the body and do things like decrease inflammation, improve blood sugar control, increase our resilience to stress, and improve our sleep. And over time, as we have a lower risk of diabetes and we're sleeping better and less stressed, our brains start to work better day to day. So then, when we look at studies where we actually have people do a new weight training program, what we see is that there's a certain part of the brain that is specifically benefited by weight training compared to something like cardio. It's called the white matter. The white matter is responsible for these fast connections within the brain as well as between the brain and the body. So when we're lifting weights, not only are we jacking up our muscles, we're also improving these connections and improving our ability to do things like make decisions under pressure. Now, you then might get studies like this one, which in hundreds of thousands of people showed that the bigger your biceps were, the lower your risk of dementia. And this obviously is my favorite study of all time. But when you look across all of these studies, what's really interesting is that when it comes to your brain, how much muscle you have and how strong you are is much more important than how much you weigh or your BMI. So in a world that tells us that we need to be a certain shape in order to be healthy, what we should actually be doing is working on getting bigger and stronger regardless of our body size. And when we do that, we'll also be working on the health and function of our brains. So then you might say, well, how much muscle is enough muscle? To answer that, I want you to look around and think, in this room, how many of these people could I beat in an arm wrestle? If the answer is less than 50%, I'm afraid you have some work to do. Because most of the benefits seem to come if you're in the top sort of 50% to 1/3 of the general population. But this doesn't necessarily require a lot of work or time. So you could do this in a couple of sessions per week, less than an hour in total, just making sure in maybe 5 or 6 different exercises to work both your lower body and your upper body. You can do this anywhere, with any kind of equipment. You can use your body weight. You can use bands. You can use your dog, like I did during lockdown. And compared to most other forms of exercise, lifting weights is actually one of the safest in terms of injury risk. But you do actually have to do some work, unfortunately. We know that the more muscle you work and the harder you work it, the more benefit that you're going to get. So that essentially means that these past 3 minutes were just a bunch of sciencey talk so that I could tell you that you can't skip leg day. Now, somebody once asked me, well, if all of this is true, what about Arnold Schwarzenegger? And I know he's made some questionable decisions, including perhaps this outfit. But I think for decades now, Arnie has just been trying to tell us how much we can benefit our brains by lifting weights. Because if we lift enough and we build enough muscles, maybe one day we'll achieve total recall. Thank you very much.